Hi, and welcome to Nashua Politics and Policy. I'm State Senator Cindy Rosenwald from Senate District 13. That's Nashua Wards 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And this is the show on Nashua Public Television, Channel 96, where we talk about all things political in New Hampshire. And I'm excited today to have with me candidate for the State House, Susan Elberger, who's running for the House for the first time in Ward 1, not my district, but my city. And welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here.
It's great to be able to talk with you this afternoon. So tell us a little bit about your background.
My grandparents all immigrated here from Eastern Europe to escape anti-Semitism. They got here around 1900. And
Through Ellis Island?
Through Ellis Island, yes. And their names are there. My sister went and found them.
Oh.
My mother and her two brothers were proud Americans. Her brothers were in the military during World War II, but my mother joined a group called the American Theater Wing, which some of us know as associated with the Stage Door Canteen. But her role, she was a very skilled pianist and accompanist, and she would go with a singer into hospitals where the wounded soldiers had been shipped back, and the singer sang and my mother accompanied her.
Did she bring her own piano? Or did the hospitals?
They would have had to have. There weren't portable pianos at that time.
So, tell me about that pin you're wearing.
Well,
I'm into jewelry.
The pin says American Theater Wing, and it was from her service then. She was fiercely proud to be an American. My dad was too, and that sense of America as the land of opportunity, the land of hope, the land of the future is always going to be better, was something that I was brought up in.
That's a value we were all taught.
Yes.
Post-war, prosperity, everything is going to be good and to continue to be better.
Yes. Rights for people were expanding. Women were starting to become more prominent in the public sphere. Minority groups were able to become more involved because some of the laws that had been restricting their abilities to participate were loosening up. And that was a wonderful and exciting time.
So do you feel that you bring your mother along with you when you wear that?
I sure hope so. She was a strong woman.
When I was sworn into the Senate for the first time, I brought a handbag that had belonged to my mother with me. And I put it on the desk in front of me, and it was like having her come with me.
Yes.
And we were able, there are only 24 senators, so we each introduced our guests. And that first time, my husband was there and one of my two children, and I introduced them, but also introduced my mother through her handbag. And so I understand how you feel, about bringing women who had perhaps less opportunity along with you and continuing the work that they started. So you've never run for the House in New Hampshire before,
I have not.
But you've held elective office elsewhere?
Yes, I was elected to the school committee in Lexington, Massachusetts twice in the 1990s. I had never run for office at all. I was incredibly naive. I just went to the town clerk's office and took out papers, and I didn't know that you needed to have people around you to help you run. So people were calling the one friend I knew who was involved in local politics and asking him if he had ever heard of me. So it was a very interesting time, but they vetted me and apparently decided I was worth supporting.
So what motivated you to run for the school board that first time?
I wanted to have something to say. I listened to other people who were in my daughter's school district and their concerns about what was going to be happening. There were some major changes that were going to be happening. A school was going to be reopening after 20 years because the school population had increased so much. And they wanted to know what was going to be happening. How do we have some input in what's going to be happening? And I said, well, I'm listening to you and I can take your concerns to other people and make them heard.
And so during your time on that school board, you reopened a school?
We reopened a school. We did work on every one of the 9 school buildings in the district during that time because the population was exploding. There hadn't been adequate work done on them for many years, and we were able to take care of that. The state in Massachusetts is much more generous than the state in New Hampshire in terms of support for school building projects.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Yeah.
But so as you think about serving in the state house, what are the issues that you're hearing about from your neighbors, and what are the issues that are really motivating you to put yourself out there?
Well, the economy. And one of my colleagues on the school committee in Lexington kept saying, a budget is the most significant policy statement that any group can make because it says where that group's priorities are. So when we look at the state budget and what does it do or not do in terms of serving the people of the state, then we have to look at having an impact there. So we know that inflation is rampant. A good deal of that comes from things that the state really can't control. We really can't control the supply chain. We can't control the war in Ukraine. But we can do things like say, why are we proud of having over $400 million in surplus funds on a state level, and at the same time, we have the lowest per pupil state funding in the entire country.
Well, and the Republicans cut public education funding in this current budget by $70 million.
Right.
$70 million.
Right.
And yet, Nashua is a district with it's the second biggest district in the state.
And I think
very
also,
diverse.
I think the second most diverse in the state as well.
At least the second most diverse. And, so we are cutting $70 million, but those costs don't go away. And
No,
of course, the school voucher program is
ridiculous.
Almost $9 million over budget.
Well, the budget was, what, $130,000? And it wasn't even budgeted. It was just assumed.
Right. And it's costing close to $9 million with really almost no accountability in it. There's a 1-year means testing, and then forever after that, the family never has to indicate that they need the financial help. We don't do other programs like that.
Right.
I mean, to qualify for Medicaid, a family needs to redetermine
every year.
Right. So we don't do things this way
right.
in New Hampshire, except for the school voucher program.
Right. And on top of that, virtually all, a very, very large percentage of the children whose families are getting vouchers, those children were never in public schools.
Right.
So,
it's only about 200 of the 1,500 or 1,600 children were already either homeschooling or paying private school tuition. So we're subsidizing something a family could already do
Right.
with tax dollars to the detriment of property taxpayers.
Yes. And the other big piece that I'm hearing a great deal of outrage about is the Public Utility Commission's decision to allow that enormous rate increase, despite utility companies having had very high profits over the last few years. And the governor's response to that was to say, we'll basically give every household $100.
Right. So
isn't that wonderful?
Again, it's corporate welfare from Chris Sununu, because he's taking part of our $400 million surplus, and instead of, I don't know, maybe using it to decrease property taxes, he is subsidizing higher rates from the utility companies approved by the Public Utilities Commissioners that he appointed.
Right. And the other big concern I have in terms of the finances for the state is the change in the retirement funds, where the state convinced so many communities to buy into a state fund
40 years ago.
And have run it down. It has been terribly mismanaged. There's virtually nothing left. The money that municipalities are putting back in is basically going to rebuild the base of investments, not to have it grow so that it can cover the retirement costs. And yet we have incredibly high property taxes because the state will not support us.
We don't make good on our promises to the communities. In fact, the Republicans this year passed a 1-year partial payment for the retirement system with a guaranteed tax increase on your property taxes the very next year. So right after the election, they're raising property taxes back up, and it's going to be between the statewide property tax cut and this retirement system. It's going to be $108 million property tax increase right after the election.
Not before, of course.
No, right after. And with maybe some one-time property tax assistance this year. So it sounds to me like someday you'd like to be on finance.
I might very well. Finance, possibly judiciary kinds of issues as well, but finance it is virtually the base from which everything else flows.
Right. Well, you learn how state government works when you work on the budget.
Right.
And as you said, it's a statement of a legislature's priorities.
Right.
And so I know you're working hard.
Yes.
We're going to run out of time in less than a minute.
Yeah.
But I wish you great luck. Is there anything you want to leave the viewers with?
I want people to know that I moved here not all that long ago and have come to love this state. It's a remarkable state. Nashua is an amazing city. We have a very rich history as a mill town, as the place where Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb were welcomed as baseball players. We go to Holcomb, my husband and I go to Holman Stadium a lot.
Got to wrap up, but I love Nashua and New Hampshire too. You've been watching New Hampshire Politics and Policy. I'm State Senator Cindy Rosenwald with candidate Susan Elberger. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap. I'll read it out.
Great job.
Thank you.
Great
You made
job.
it